Good to see you all, and welcome from Jerusalem. I'm going to call this the Power Hour, and this is my first attempt at this. It's going to develop as things go on, but for this evening, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about who I am, what I'm doing in terms of my coaching, and how I think that coaching practice is going to move forward in time. So I'm going to start by doing an exercise that I find really useful myself, and the exercise is called grounding. So part of my methodology for working as a coach is to use the three principles, and I'll just give you a little bit of background as to what the three principles are before I do the grounding exercise. So essentially, the three principles were, if you like, discovered by Sydney Banks in the 1960s, 1970s. And my understanding of it is really it's an outgrowth of mindfulness. So generally what we understand in mindfulness is this idea that we have to be present to our experience as much as we possibly can. And one corollary of that is that we begin to understand that we are not our thoughts. Okay, we are not our thoughts. I think a lot of people would be familiar with that idea from if they were familiar with meditation, for example, or even any other form of Buddhism. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to ask people to accept that they are not their thoughts. So what the three principles does is it goes slightly deeper than this, and it suggests or asks the question, okay, if you are not your thoughts, then who are you? And within the three principles, effectively, they are thought, consciousness, and mind. So the mind in the principles, the way I look at it, is very similar to the mind in mindfulness, and that is who we really are. That is the source of our wisdom. Okay, that is the source of our true understanding of ourselves and our thoughts, feelings, and experience of life. So when Sid intuited this idea that there were these three things going on, he also, he actually had this insight into his own thinking after he had a conversation with a friend of his. And my understanding is that the friend actually said to him, Sid, Sid was talking about feeling depressed or being depressed. And his friend said to him, Sid, you're not actually depressed, you just think you are. And that thought, or that sparked something off in Sid's mind. He went down this very, very deep rabbit hole of insight into his own thinking, and he began to realize, you know what? I'm not really depressed. I am just thinking these thoughts, and I'm living in the feeling of my thinking. And now I'm becoming aware of the fact that I am a thinking being, but I know that I am not my thoughts. I'm going to go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and realize, who am I? I am actually mind. I am my deepest wisdom. I am my innate health. I am really not the person that I thought I was. So another way of saying the same thing is don't believe everything you think. I really like that expression. I really enjoyed hearing that for the first time. Don't believe everything you think. And that comes up for me again and again and again. Don't believe everything you think. We have so many thoughts all day long that are, the result of the experiences that we go through in life. We have various different thoughts thinking about these experiences. And if we don't believe everything that we think, then we understand that we are not our thoughts, and we understand that actually, once we get into this level of mind and we have some insight into our thinking, we can kind of look up at our thinking and how our thoughts thought and consciousness create something called a separate reality. So we're all walking around in our separate realities in life. It's like, it's the metaphor that I use is, if I tell a joke, whatever that joke might be, one person will laugh at the joke, another person won't. So is the joke really funny? Well, it is funny to the person who's having funny thinking and funny thinking about a funny feeling about the joke, but it's not funny to the person who's not having funny thinking or funny feeling. And that's really an example of us living in our own separate realities and living in the feeling of our thinking. Anyway, that's a bit of a long-winded introduction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little grounding exercise. So grounding is where I, as a coach, take responsibility for my own state before I start any coaching session. What do I mean by that? I take responsibility for my own state in the sense that I ground myself in who I really am. I ground myself in mind. I ground myself in wisdom, and I don't over-identify with my own thinking. It all sounds a little bit esoteric, but you're going to see how it works in a minute, because I'm going to read you a couple of passages, and if you listen carefully to what I'm saying, and you listen carefully to the words, they're not my words, they're from a book that I have online, a Kindle book. What can happen? I don't want to sort of what's the word? I don't want to put thoughts into your head, but what can happen, and what happens for me, is that I tend to, at one point during the reading, I will kind of do this kind of exhale. And that's the point at which I know, okay, fine, I'm grounded myself. I'm in my wisdom, I'm in mind, I'm where I need to be, and I'm calm. And then from that process of being calm, I can then coach more effectively, because I'm not busy analyzing everything that's being said to me, and I can actually be present with the person that I'm coaching. So that's a very, very long 7-minute, 20-second explanation of what I'm about to do. But anyway, let me just pick up my phone, get onto my Kindle app, and find the book that I want to show you. So just give me a second while I find the book. Yeah, here we go. Now, let me just go back to the cover, because it's actually a very, very nice cover. So, oops, I wonder if I can get back to it. I'm going to have to do this. Okay, fine. So here we go. The book is called Being Human. I'm hoping that the glare is not too much. Maybe it is a little bit too much. It's called Being Human, and it's by a wonderful, wonderful coach called Amy Johnson. Now, Amy is a Three Principles coach. She's very kind of open about her understanding of the three principles. She coaches from an understanding of the three principles, but she is she doesn't call herself a three principles coach as such. Anyway, I'm going to try and find a good passage for you, and for me, actually, for myself, to sort of ground myself. So here we go. Obviously, you can tell I haven't really planned this today, but that's okay. I feel like this is one of many for me, and really this is just about me becoming comfortable being on camera and being live, and allowing you to feel comfortable as well. So here we go. Why was I blown away that summer day? Amy's describing an experience she had. It was partly the conviction with which the speaker stated these facts. Although I can't remember his name, I vividly recall his confidence. But mostly, it was the simplicity of it all. You are well, period. Everyone on earth, essentially, always. There are no exceptions, caveats, conditions, or rules to remember. And there's absolutely nothing you have to do. Nothing you even can do to make it more or less true. And then she carries on. Are you skeptical about this idea of you being well? If you're noticing that at this very moment you are most certainly not in touch with your innate well-being, I hear you, but ask yourself this. If well-being and peace of mind are not home base for you, why do you fight so hard to return there when you're not there? If stress and mental chaos were home base, there's that exhale. They would feel like home, wouldn't they? They might feel unpleasant, but they would feel natural, familiar, and comfortable on some level. Stress and mental busyness go against your nature, and that's why you struggle to fix them. That's why you scramble to return home to the wellness in which you were born. Rather than assuming that you've no innate well-being, consider instead that you might simply be experiencing a whole mess of personal thinking, which appears to cloud your perfect natural state. When you're not experiencing your emotional wellness, it's only because you're caught up in otherwise arbitrary and habitual thought. Those moments of supreme peace you sometimes experience are who you naturally are. When you're experiencing anything else, you're simply in a fog of thought. So, why was it important for me to ground myself and talk about and sort of ground myself before I got on camera and went live today? Well, it was important for me because I've been going through a process this week of asking for help. So people that know me will know that I'm starting an online business. It's called the Mindful Eating Project. And it is really based on a combination of mindfulness and the three principles. And it's something that I have used to create permanent weight loss for myself. It's something that I discovered and created when I received a diabetes diagnosis in 2019. And I went on a number of diets which didn't work. And I knew, having this diabetes diagnosis, that I couldn't actually afford to fail. And so I decided to basically use my experience as a coach and actually return to the three principles, return to mindfulness, and find the thing that would allow me to get a permanent result. And amazingly enough, what I just did, that process there of getting an insight for myself, grounding myself, relaxing into my own wisdom and my own innate health, gave me some amazing insights about how my body works naturally, and how if I just work with my body, then I will be able to achieve permanent weight loss almost effortlessly. And in fact, the process of gaining insight, which is something that really floored me when I realized this, the process of gaining insight is the thing that produces permanent change. That was just amazing to me. I knew insight was powerful. I knew that insight allowed me to, come at the world from my innate health, come at the world from a place of mind, and wisdom and connection, true connection with other people. But what I didn't understand, what I didn't realize, was that it is the seat of my own innate health, and it is the thing that allowed me to make this permanent change, rather than go on a cycle of, I don't know, dieting and then regaining weight and binging, all this kind of stuff. It just allowed me to get in touch with my body's own natural system for keeping me slim. Anyway, I'll talk about that probably on a future live, I would have thought. So what I decided to do was to enroll in an online business course, and I've been working with clients, I've been working with people on this, but I'm finding that as a business person, I come up against, or have come up against, some very specific challenges, right? So one of those challenges is the fact that I have spent my whole career, and again, if you know me, you'll know this, I spent 30 years working in the UK as a high school teacher. So I have always had a boss. I've always had somebody to tell me where I have to be, what I have to do, who I have to teach, in some cases, how I have to teach. And it's, it's something that I always railed against. It's something I always kind of, you know, had a problem with, right? Well, this boss doesn't understand me. This boss does this. This boss does that. And what I've come to realize as an entrepreneur who doesn't have a boss anymore is that actually, in some ways, I need one, because this was kind of shocking to me when I realized it. I am not necessarily the best employee. Left to my own devices, I sometimes come up lacking, you know. I have a podcast that I'm created on Spotify. It's by the by, but it's called Building a Brand of One. And I did an episode last week called If You Could Fire Yourself, Would You? I went through this exercise last Sunday, where it's sort of an imaginary exercise, where I kind of hauled myself in front of HR and gave myself a dressing down, because I just was not doing what I thought would be very easy to do, right? Like, you just kind of imagine that if you're left to your own devices, well, you're going to do everything you're supposed to do, right? You're going to keep to your own agreements and you're not going to get distracted. It doesn't happen. So when I hauled myself in front of HR, I actually imagine sitting in front of two bosses that I've had in the past who've possibly been the most critical of me, or, you know, demanding. And I kind of use that input to give myself a bit of a dressing down and just imagine what they would say to me, which is basically pull your finger out and make it happen. Okay, so that was the first layer. Then during the week, I had an insight about this, and I realized that, you know what, whilst I complained about these bosses, the one thing that I wasn't really acknowledging was that, in fact, those people knew how to get the best out of me, right? Those people knew how to challenge me, how to get me to work harder, how to get me to do all the things that I wasn't able to do for myself. And that was quite a humbling realization. But that led me to understand, you know what, maybe I need a boss. Maybe I actually need somebody who's going to tell me what to do. But if you're self-employed, how do you work that out? Okay, there is a saying in the coaching world that a coach needs a coach, and I've been really reluctant to follow that advice. I don't know why. Perhaps I'm just stubborn. Perhaps I'm cynical. I can't really tell you why. But what I decided to do this week was to hire a coach, and I can see immediately the difference in me. And the reason that I hired this coach was because I could see immediately the difference in her from hiring a coach herself. It was obvious. It was just everything about the way she was turning up in her business, the way she was turning up online. Jeannie, if you're still here, it's you. I'm happy to give you a shout out. And I had to accept, you know what? I need a coach. I need a boss. I need to pay somebody to be my boss. Because what's great about this is that my coach will tell me to go and do things that I might not normally want to do. I'm glad you're here. And I would just go and do them. Right? No questions asked. I would just go and do them. I would not do those things where had someone else not told me that's what you need to do. And for example, I did a few challenges today. And after I did those challenges, I realized, you know what, I kind of knew that intellectually anyway. Like I knew it was all about no attachment to alcohol. But you have to do those things in order to get that experiential learning. You actually have to have done it. You've got to have done the work in order to then be able to reflect on the work and get the learning. You can't just bypass the work and try and get to the learning. And certainly if you're coaching somebody, you can't allow them to just do this intellectual exercise where they're bypassing the work and just trying to get to the learning, because they won't have internalized it. It won't have become part of who they are. Okay, so that was the first part, right? I came to this realization, this kind of humbling realization, insight, if you like, that I needed a coach. Yes, a coach does need a coach, and they need a coach because basically if you're self-employed, you need some kind of accountability that is not, it's kind of outside of yourself. It's almost impossible, I find, certainly the beginning of my coaching journey, my entrepreneurial journey, to just motivate myself, keep myself accountable all the time. It's virtually impossible, certainly in the beginning. Some people can do it. I mean, there are some people who might say, well, listen, if you need a coach to do it, then don't bother doing it, because if you can't do it on your own, okay, I hear that, but I'm human like everybody else. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about how you select somebody that you want to work with, because it's not a straightforward process. In fact, I hired two people this week, two different people for different reasons. But prior to that, I had spoken to a couple of people, and I've got to be honest and say that after I'd spoken to these people, when I started to not think about how I was feeling, but when I started to become aware of how I was feeling after speaking to some of these people, I realized I just wasn't sitting well with me. I wasn't feeling good about working with them, and I couldn't work out why. Okay, I just couldn't. It didn't make sense to me. Like on the surface, intellectually, everything was fine. This person was saying the right thing. I understood them, you know. And so during the week, when I'm in this mode of kind of looking around and searching and opening my mind out to the fact that, okay, yes, I need help. I want help. If I'm going to get help, who am I going to ask for help? Right. So first of all, it helps if you know the person, if you have some kind of history with the person. Both the people that I've started working with this week, I already knew, which was a good thing. So to know someone is to trust somebody, I guess. But it goes a bit deeper than that. So the other person I started working with is someone called John Street, whose course I've been looking at today. Very, very knowledgeable marketing guy. If you want to get on a really great email subscription, then subscribe to John Street, because I'll tell you, I'll share briefly why one of the reasons I chose him. I went through my email inbox, and I received 13 emails from various different coaches that I've kind of subscribed to over time, completely forgotten that I subscribed to them. And I had to go and look into my inbox to see just how many I had. I had no idea that I subscribed to all these people. 13 of them, right? 12 of them, I never opened the email. And I realized I never opened the email for a very simple reason. I opened one of them and I realized that what these people were doing were trying to sell. Okay? Their emails were marketing, advertising. Did you know we had this product? Did you know we had that product? Yes, you don't necessarily want to hear that. When I opened John's email, which is probably the only person whose email I actually open, all I get is value. He just provides value. Okay, every single email is, I don't know, there's just something, he's giving you value and he's not asking for anything in return, which, when I think about it, is pretty amazing. So I decided, all right, let me click on one of his links. He's doing He's doing a promotion, and he's going to teach people how to do email marketing. All right. So what John does is he gives you a kind of an advertisement, quite a long, like an hour and a half promotional sort of advertisement for the course that he's doing, and he tells you his whole life story, and he tells you about his, his sort of growing up and what it was like with his parents, and oh, this parent believed in me, and that parent didn't believe in me, and this is what I tried, and this didn't work, and this. So he's kind of drawing you in to his story, and he's finding a way of creating rapport with you um, as he goes along. And then at the point where he's suggesting that you might sign up and do his course, first of all, he gives you lots and lots of different options for what you can do, and he makes it very easy for you because none of them are very expensive. Anyway, this is the point I've been trying to get to. One of the things that John did in this promotional, in this little sort of advertisement thing, again, providing amazing value, is he said in business, it really is important to become aware of your values, because when you're talking to people, or when you're considering buying something, or certainly taking on somebody's services, if something doesn't feel right within you about that person, then what that means is that there's something about that person's values that doesn't connect with yours. And that might sound like quite a simple analysis, but actually it's very deep. If you don't jive with somebody, if you don't trust them, if you don't, there's something off about what they're saying, or the way they're coming across, or the way they're presenting themselves, then generally speaking, it's to do with the fact that their value system doesn't match yours. And I realized some of the other people that I was speaking to did not match my values. So there are specific values. I think I've got about 12 of them, but I can share some of them with you. So one of them was integrity, one of them was openness, and one of them is accountability. Whoops. So in the conversation that I was having with one of these people, I'm not going to talk about who it was, this person, they said something to me that was just, it was obvious to me that they weren't being completely honest about what they were saying. It was like covering up for something else. Basically, they'd been told to say certain things, and it was very obvious that they'd been coached themselves, or told, you have to say this, that, or the other. And the other thing was they didn't seem to be prepared to be accountable for themselves. So when I spoke to them about, coaching, et cetera, and why I might want to work with them, their answer was all to do with how I turn up. Well, it's about how you turn up, doesn't it? It's, you are responsible. So for me, what that communicates, the sort of sub-communication there is, I've got absolutely zero responsibility for the results that you create. The results that you create are entirely your responsibility, which again translates to, well, if you fail, it's not my fault. Right? Nice and easy get out. I don't like that, because what that means is I'm leading, I'm coaching, I'm asking you for money, but I'm not being accountable. Now, for some reason, I want to talk about football management here, because I'm completely obsessed with football management. And I've used it certainly to create my first business. And what I find is, I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but what I find is, in general terms, the football managers that create the best results are often the most humble, and they are often people who make themselves accountable. So there is a wonderful podcast you can listen to if you're a football fan. It's called the High Performance Podcast. And just out of interest, they were interviewing this week, I think it was, Eddie Howe. Now, apologies for American viewers, but Eddie Howe is the manager of Newcastle United. Newcastle United have come from nowhere to be about third or fourth in the Premier League. And he said something really, really interesting about his previous job. So the reason that he was asked to become the manager of Newcastle United when they were taken over, I think it's Qatari money they've got, or no, Saudi money. I think they're one of the richest football clubs in the world now. And the reason that they hired him was because he did so well with his previous side. However, Eddie Howe sat there and talked about the fact that he felt he'd failed. Okay, he was the manager of Bournemouth, and he felt, when Bournemouth weren't getting the results that they should have been getting, or that the performance kind of dipped, he took responsibility, took accountability. He said, "I think I failed." And for me, that's huge. That is, it's so easy to blame the players. It's so easy to blame the person that you're working with. I mean, even as a teacher, my career as a teacher, if kids didn't do well in an exam, it's very easy to write it off and just say, well, they didn't work hard enough, etc. And it's much more difficult to think, well, is there something else I could have done as a teacher to reach that child? Maybe I wasn't teaching in the way that, was in their preferred learning style, or I didn't motivate them enough. So I think it's important for my own growth and my own development for me to take some accountability. And it's very heartening to see that, in fact, some of the top performers, because this guy is probably the top performing English manager out there at the moment, he's sitting there saying, I take accountability for the failure of my team at that period of time. So when I was speaking to this person, the person that I didn't hire, I had a problem with their lack of openness and their lack of accountability, but I didn't know that until I went away and did that exercise that John Street encouraged me to do, which was to look at what my values are. And the deeper I got into my list of values, the more it became clear to me why I didn't resonate with certain other people as well. So there are other people in this coaching space. So one of my values is joy, believe it or not, is happiness. And I have a real problem with people who never smile. And there's an awful lot of people in this space, in this world, who don't smile. They're like completely stony faced. And I just never really understood why that's such a problem for me. But the closer I got to analysing my own values, the more I realised joy being one of my values. I think it's really, really important. I think it's really important for me, for the quality of my own experience, but I also think it's important for creating rapport with people. I certainly don't want to sit and listen to somebody who's completely stony-faced and completely serious all the time about absolutely everything. I can't relate to that. Anyway, so how long were I? About halfway through. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I made some notes about other things I want to talk about. Yeah. Okay. So I will talk a little bit more about the Mindful Eating project and how I came about this, how I developed it, and why I think it's kind of like a new and revolutionary approach, really. So one of the ways that I'm promoting this is I've got a TikTok account. So if you want to follow me on TikTok, I will put a link somewhere on my bio and you can come say hello. And I made a TikTok recently. I made a little video recently which got a lot of traction. And what I suggested, what I said to people was, the hook that I kind of used to get people involved in the discussion, in the debate, was this. I said, here is why you shouldn't be obsessing about your weight, because the answer is right in front of you or sitting next to you. Because we all know people who are naturally thin, right? And actually the answer to your weight loss problem is in them. So my suggestion to people is observe your friends who are naturally thin, don't have a weight problem, and see what they do. And then the kind of hint that I gave at the end was, it's never about what they eat. So just to develop that idea, it is never about what they eat. What it is about is how they eat. So this is how I came to this realization. I was sitting in a cafe in London. I'm in Jerusalem now, by the way. I've been here since September. But before I came to Jerusalem, I was in London, lived in London most of my life, and I was sitting in a cafe. It just so happens that this cafe is kind of like an open plan. It's an open plan eating area, and it overlooked a restaurant. But the restaurant was not that close to me that if I was observing somebody eating, they would know I was observing them. So I wasn't sort of staring at someone making them feel uncomfortable. But I just happened to notice, I wasn't even really thinking about anything, but something happened to catch my eye. So what caught my eye? I was watching somebody eating. Okay, I was watching this guy eating, older guy. And if you've ever been to England before, I think you'll probably know what a cooked breakfast is. He was eating a cooked breakfast. All right. I have never seen anyone eat more slowly than this guy. It was incredible to me. I was thinking to myself, surely that food went cold 15 minutes ago. He was taking tiny little bites and he was chewing and he was totally involved in the conversation that he was having with the person opposite him. He was enjoying his food. He was kind of like, savoring it and eating really, really slowly. And the other thing I noticed about him was that he was stick thin. I don't know if this resonates with any of you. Now, almost miraculously, in my eyesight, there were another group of people over here, group of four. They were facing each other, and they were all, let's just say they weren't slim. Okay, these four, they were not slim. And they were eating fish and chips. Fine. They were also busy engaged in their conversation, but they were shoveling. Okay? They were eating really fast. And it really hit home to me. Hold on a minute. There's a connection here. This guy is skinny as a rake and he's eating slower than I've ever seen anyone eat. These people over here all look like they've got a weight problem and they're shoveling. So I thought to myself, oh my goodness, that is amazing. Now, intellectually, I probably could have told you, and I'm sure you could probably guess, that is the difference. If you're looking at people that you know, that really is the difference between people who are naturally slim and people who aren't. So the people who are naturally slim, generally speaking, eat more slowly. Now, what if you are one of those people who has a problem with their weight and you do watch the person sitting next to you, or you do watch the person that you know is naturally slim, and you do understand that generally they eat slower. Now, obviously there are exceptions to this. The exception proves the rule. I know people who are very skinny and they eat loads and loads and loads and they eat very quickly. Fine, but let's try and boil it down to the basics. It seemed to me that if you want to lose weight naturally and keep it off, then you've got to find some way of turning yourself into one of those slimmer people, which means you've got to try and find some way of slowing your eating down. Now, if you remember back to the beginning of the video, because obviously you've all been here for the whole 38 minutes I've been on, you'd have heard me say that insight is something that produces permanent change. So what happened to me was I had that insight sitting in the restaurant, but then I had a few other insights after that, which really did make some permanent change in me. Because what I began to realize was that if we slow down, so I made myself slow down. I started counting my chews. First of all, it was, can I do 5 chews every time I eat something? Can I do 10? Can I do 20? And I got up to about 30 chews. And something very interesting happened when I started to do that. I finally began to taste what I was eating. Now that might sound very odd to some of you, but I finally began to taste what I was eating. And one of the big surprises that I had was that a lot of the food that I ate, I didn't actually like. But once I started tasting it for the first time, once I put my salivary glands, if you like, into operation and my taste buds, because the food was now staying long enough in my mouth for me to taste it, whereas before, a lot of the time I'd just been throwing it down me, I began to realize that I had this insight that our bodies actually have 2 centers of digestion. Now that might sound, logically, well, obviously, duh, but until you experience it yourself by slowing your eating down, you don't necessarily realize that your body has two centers of digestion. And if you chew your food properly, you've done half the job. So your stomach has less work to do. So that was the first insight. Yeah, I had a lot of experiences of going out and eating things that my mind told me previously that I wanted to eat, but then which became, I started to realize I don't actually like this food. I remember there was one sandwich shop I used to go into, and I went into the same sandwich shop the same time every week. And I remember my thought process. My thought process was, how hungry am I? So when I asked my mind this question, the answer came back, very hungry. Fine. So what that translated to is I need to go and buy the biggest sandwich I can find and a packet of crisps. That's what I used to do. And then I would literally sit in my car driving, wolfing this stuff down, going to my next destination. So what I decided to do was, no, I'm going to sit down and eat every single meal. If I've got a knife and fork and a plate, I will do that. And even if I don't, if it is a sandwich, I will sit down. So I actually remember sitting on a park bench eating this sandwich. And after chewing it about, 10, 15 times, first of all, the thing disintegrated in my mouth. And secondly, I realized I actually really don't like this. I've been eating this for months and months. I don't actually like. I don't like the taste of it. Anyway, so yes, I started to taste things and realized that we had two centers of digestion. And then I had another insight which really changed me, and that was the following. I began to realize that all the diets that I'd followed previously, so when I got this diabetes diagnosis, I went on a couple of different diets, and they all worked until they stopped working. And I realized that those diets all had one thing in common, and that was I was changing something outside of me, as in I was restricting a particular food group, for example, if it was keto, or I was counting a particular number of calories that I was going to have during the day, or I was deciding on a particular type of exercise to do. Everything was outside in. And I realized, being a coach, that the answers, generally speaking, to my innate health come from the inside out. They come from when I get in contact with my innate health, with my wisdom, with mind, and that gives me the answers to what I should do. So I started to model people who were slim. I started to slow down, and I had these insights, and I realized, you know what, I'm actually starting to lose weight. This is mad. So then I applied the same principle to cooking food and to then shopping for food. And I realized that there is actually a very strong connection between mindfulness and the three principles. So I called it the Mindful Eating Project, mainly because most people know what mindfulness is and very few people know what the three principles are. So for me to make that connection in people's minds, I'm already talking about something that they know and I'm just linking it to something new. And the results kind of speak for themselves. So you have this kind of this inner change, and the inner change is permanent. So you realize that you're never going to go on a diet again, because once you've seen that diets only work outside in, you can't unsee that. And once you realize that goes contrary to your own innate health and your own innate wisdom, you're not going to go back down that route again. So I was kind of committed to this process. And even though it's a long-term process, you can't just expect it to work in the same way that a diet will work. Like, you're not going to get fast results. You're not going to get fast results and then as soon as you finish the diet, put all the weight back on with interest, which is what happened previously. What's going to happen is you're going to get slow results, but they're going to be permanent results. So that's how the Mindful Eating Project kind of manifested itself. And it's been an interesting journey. So I'm using TikTok as a way of working through this business course that I'm doing. I'm having to interview people, first do what they call an ICA interview, which is really interview them about where they are in their journey, tell them a little bit what I do, and then that develops into a sales process. If that's something that you're interested in, please feel free to get in contact. So I said it was going to be a power hour. It's been a power 45 minutes or so. I think that's pretty good. I've had a few people on. I'm very happy with that. So I think I'm going to love you and leave it there. And I will be back at the same time. So I feel like a Sunday is quite a good time. People have got time to either watch live or they've got time to watch the recording. So if that's you and you're watching the recording, then just let me know in the comments. Say hello, let me know you were here. And I will see you again this time next week.